Among the greatest contributions of the ancient Greeks to Western civilization was their celebration of human rationality. This found expression in the way political life was organized and thought about. The Greek city-state, the polis, the very root word of the word politics, provided the context for pivotal attempts at developing the philosophical foundations of politics as a distinct human activity. For this reason, the ancient Greeks came to play a central role in the historical conversation that would shape Western ethical thought. Among the greatest of the ancient philosophers was, of course, Plato. A student of the great Socrates, Plato argued that the objects of philosophical investigation and true knowledge are not the things that come to us through our senses, but rather their unchanging essences, of which they are mere reflections. That there was this intelligible world of pure and unchanging essences which constitute the truth about things. And it was then the task of philosophers to access this world. Philosophers were special because philosophers were the only ones who could actually understand and discover the true nature of things. And this is the reason why Plato accorded the philosophers a very important role in the state, in his republic. This idea of what constituted true knowledge framed Plato's understanding of justice. Justice consisted not in what we observe to be just acts. These are just shadows, reflections, mere reflections of the essence of justice. The essence of justice, according to Plato, was the proper ordering of the human soul. That is, a state where reason governs, the spirited element enforces the governance of reason, and the appetites kept under control and confined to nourishing the body. Such an ordering of the soul is the essence of justice, for a soul so constituted cannot but be just. For example, a person whose soul is so ordered will not covet another person's property or wife because his appetites are under the governance of his reason, and that his soul is in a state of balance, and he is not driven to commit acts that are irrational. The same order applied to achieving justice in the state, according to Plato, who asked, "Does it not follow at once that state and individual will be wise or brave by virtue of the same element in each and in the same way?" Thus, it is obvious that Plato was no democrat, for he insisted that only those who are exemplars of rationality, the so-called guardians who were philosopher kings, were fit to rule. This autocracy of the intellect was a necessary condition for justice in the state. Indeed, Plato was of the view that unless philosophers became kings, or kings became philosophers, there would be no end to human misery. Under this system imagined by Plato, the class of people whose courage reflected the dominance of the spirited element protected the state from those forces that will destroy it, and did so under the firm command of the most rational class. So here, courage is in fact governed by reason. This is not reckless courage. Those members driven by their appetites, the inferior multitudes or the so-called masses, were confined to nourishing the state. Such a system was to be maintained not so much by force as by the concord or agreement resulting from the acceptance by each of the classes of their proper place in the state. The importance of Plato in political theory could not be overemphasized. his perspective on the question of who should rule or what the basis of political authority should be remains an important part of the Western philosophical tradition. Those who continue to search for an alternative to democratic politics will find in his work an enduring critique of popular sovereignty. On the other hand, those who defend democracy and its place in the modern world will find in Plato's critique a useful guide for examining the coherence and relevance of their arguments. Indeed, we can say that this emphasis on knowledge and competence in politics resonates in today's world, given the issues that we face with corruption, with incompetence in government. So in a sense, Plato is saying something that is timeless, because even as we commit ourselves to democratic values, at the end of the day, government will always be measured in terms of its ability to govern, its ability to address issues. And to the extent that this is something that is made possible by knowledge, by competence, and by virtue, then Plato remains a very important voice, no, in political discussions. Plato's profound rejection of democratic government is an important driver of the historical conversation on the purposes of political rule. It is also a continuing and potent reminder to all those who wish to meaningfully participate in this conversation to ground their arguments on fundamental claims about the nature of reality and how we come to have knowledge of it. As democratic governments falter in many places today, it is incumbent upon committed Democrats to defend democracy as a form of government on the basis of a deep appreciation of the very arguments that challenge it. Plato's critique is one such argument. Perhaps the most significant legacy of Plato in modern times is his insistence on putting virtue at the center of public and political life. Even his rejection of democracy is based on the attainment of virtue. In his view, democratic rule is a system incapable of virtue and must thus be abandoned. Power and the different ways it may be shared in society are not ends in themselves, but rather the means to achieving the good society and of defending it against the ever-present threat of vice, of war, and factionalism.